see a slide change on mine, Kaplan.
It's going.
Perfect. So I'm Miss Nieto, obviously, and then we have Miss Shaw here. Miss Shaw, wave, hello. Mr. Rowan, wave, hello. And Miss Kaplan. Awesome. So we're going to go through first talking about advocacy and kind of like a little bit about 7-8 and what that's like. And then afterwards, each of us are going to talk about our classes and what we're going to be learning this year and all of that fun stuff. So we're going to go ahead and keep going.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to start out talking about advocacy. We believe it's a foundational piece of our school. It always has been from the earliest days till the present. And our routine, we start each day in morning circle. It's a great time to check in, see each other eye to eye, notice each other. We usually share in circle and just gets everybody started off on the right foot for the day. Then right before recess and lunch, we have a 30-minute advocacy period, which we cover different things that we think benefit our students. Mondays, we do Move It Mondays, so we involve movement within our advocacy lessons and highlight that throughout the day. Tuesday and Wednesday, we focus on advocacy lessons. Each month has a different theme. The first month we focused on our new RISE acronym that stands for Respect, Integrity, Safety, and Empathy. So we spent a week focusing on each of those. And this coming month we're going to be focusing on personal strengths. What are our strengths? What makes us special? On Thursdays, we have our service learning time where we're currently brainstorming in our advocacies what we want our service learning projects to be, and we'll spend Thursdays working on those. And then Friday, we do grade check and email home to guardians and to the teachers, where we have students list any missing assignments, a plan to get those done, a goal for the week, a success for the week. Working on executive functioning and staying organized with what needs to happen. Then at the end of the day, it's just a time to gather together and make sure we're all ending the day positively. We work as a community to clean up the room and just make sure we're all set to go for the day. Another thing we do in 7-8, we have committees that we let students join if they would like to. Ms. Nieto has the education committee where they plan field trips and guest speakers. Ms. Kaplan has a social committee where they plan dances and celebrations. Ms. Shaw is doing the recycling committee where they focus on recycling. And then my committee is the RISE committee where we brainstorm ways to promote RISE throughout the pod, throughout the school, and things like that. And yeah, talked about the monthly theme. You can see on the pictures at the end of the last Friday of every month, we have RISE celebration. We go out to the amphitheater and the whole pod goes out. We talk about respect, integrity, safety, empathy, whichever one we're focusing on. And then we do shout outs where students can shout out each other for things they've seen, positive things, RISE behaviors they've seen. And our first one at the end of August was really special. It was real positive and lots of great energy, and the students were really into it. So we're going to make that a tradition. And then you can see the RISE slips that we're promoting within the school, where teachers can give students a RISE slip, or students can give each other a RISE slip. And then there's students on Fridays that are randomly called and selected that have received the RISE slip, and they get to go down to the lobby and get high fives from admin and just get celebrated, right, for that positive behavior. Awesome. So just an overview and advocacy. The purpose really is to build healthy, strong, supportive relationships, both with their peers and with the trusting adult. recognition of the community. It's where we recognize what's happening and who we are as a class community, a pod community, and a school community. We engage in activities that support social and emotional growth, career readiness, and academic support, executive functioning, being organized, things like that. And then opportunities for positive peer interactions, life skills, development, and then we have our service learning during that time as well. So these are some of the things that we focus on during our advocacy lessons on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Okay, hello, I'm Ms. Shaw. So I'm going to talk about communication in our pod. So there is an ideal communication pathway. So up here we have all of the teachers' emails, as well as Ms. Kaplan, who is our team lead. And so we ask that the first form of contact is with the specific teacher, and then it can go to the team lead, our assistant principal, Ms. Callahan, and then to our executive director, Ms. Collins. So this will help us keep the pod moving slowly and be able to help smoothly and help everyone with all of their questions. And then also with communication, every student is given a blue communication folder and a planner at the beginning of the year. We also do post weekly classroom updates and advocacy updates each week to our classroom pages. You should see some of those emails come through each week as well. So at the end of each class, the teachers will have students write in their planners, and they'll go around and check them. Students will receive either a sticker or the teacher's initials. Some teachers like using stamps. Then they'll spell a word out throughout the week and the students can guess the word. It's always fun. As well as IC. So each week teachers will post grades into IC, and that link can also be found on the Westgate website. And each week students do send emails home. That is our Friday advocacy routine. They have their parents and families attached to the emails as well as teachers, so it'll help us really help the students if they're struggling in a class or really get them moving.
Hi, for those who don't know, I'm Ms. Kaplan. I'm just talking a little bit about the grading scales, our policies and things like that. Here at Westgate, we do the grading scale. It's standards-based grading. It shows authenticity about where they are, the students, about their proficiency. We have lots of different rubrics that we use. You can see here an advanced is a 4. It is more difficult to achieve. The students who are at 3s are meeting the standards, or that's where we like to see where the kids are continuing to grow to get to. 2 is partial master of the standards, and 1 is little or no mastery of our standards. And then with our weighting of our grades, we have 4 different parts. We have pre-assessments, which are 0%. We don't even put them onto Infinite Campus, but we do take pre-assessments with the students to see where they're at, to see where they need to go for any of the classes. 40% is for our classwork, 30% are for projects, and 30% are for quizzes and tests. When it comes to our grading and our assignments, we do have a late work policy, and it is expected that all work and assignments are completed on the expected due date. We understand that there are circumstances beyond our control, or there's legally documented accommodations in place, and we talk to those students as well, so we can talk to them. If a student does not have a specific reason why, or they just need an extension for a due date, we do give that to the students. We do ask students to come to that teacher before the due date. So if I have an assignment and it's due today on Thursday, I would like students to come either Thursday or before that, be like, hey, Ms. Kaplan, I need a little extra time. Usually we're good about that. You can get an extension, just making sure we're coming there before the due date. When it comes to assignments that are turned in late, we have a 2-week late work policy. If a student turns in an assignment 1 to 6 days late, they will receive a 1 to 4, whatever grade they earned on that assignment. It will stay in Infinite Campus that was turned in late. If an assignment is turned in 7 to 13 days late, they will be receiving a 1 to 2 for their grade, still staying late on Infinite Campus. And if it's 14 days late, they will receive a 1 grade. Anything after those 2 weeks, we will not accept that. And if the students are continually missing work, not turning things in, we will communicate home to find out what is going on. You will also be receiving those weekly emails about missing work. So. And then with the homework policy, typically Westgate students do not have schoolwork to complete at home. We want them to have fun. They're students, they're kids. We want them to spend time with you. We want them to pursue their passions, go and play sports. But there are some exceptions to these rules. Our first one is students are expected to read any literacy books that they have at home. Second, when a student has makeup work or are absent, they need to work on any of those so they can catch up back up with the rest of the class. If a student needs a little bit extra practice to become proficient in a skill, when a student has been unproductive during class time, so if they're just not wanting to complete assignments, we'll email you, say, hey, this needs to get done at home. And a fourth one is if there's a special at-home project. We do have some here in 7-8 because we want students to start getting ready for high school or anything after they go to high school as well to get them ready. And we know that in high school there is homework, so little things here and there to prepare them.
Awesome. We get to talk about everyone's favorite class, language arts. Best class of the day. So for the 8th graders, we're going to go through all of the 8th grade classes first, and then we'll do 7th grade. But my goal for 7th and 8th graders in language arts is the same. So it's that I want students to have a love of reading. I want them to become passionate about finding good books for themselves, and also becoming strong writers and loving to write creatively and academically. I know a lot of students love the creative writing, but also building up their skills for high school and college. If they go to Westgate for high school, there's a lot of essays that they have to do at Front Range and even to get into the high school. So really working on those writing skills is a big goal of mine. Next slide, Kaplan. Cool. Awesome. So in quarter 1 for the 8th graders, right now we've been working through a lot of short stories. And our whole theme for these short stories has all been, how can we tell right from wrong? We've talked a lot about morality and had some really fun Socratic seminars, focusing on doing some articles of the week, which basically just bring like different stories or articles from like the news to the students, so they can really focus on reading skills and how to write good responses using RACES, which is something we use at Westgate for a lot of our short responses. It's just an acronym that helps students remember what parts to put into a response. So the R is like restating the question, the A is answering it, the C is citing text evidence, and then the S is summarizing. Also, like I said, we did a Socratic seminar recently for the 8th graders. That was on Friday, and they did amazing. I was so impressed. So we're going to be doing more of those throughout the quarter. And then their summative for this quarter will be an essay that they're writing that answers the question, what motivates people to do bad things? And they're going to use all of the short stories and nonfiction texts that we've read to try to like pull evidence and answer it. So that's going to be super fun. For quarter 2, I always do a Holocaust and World War II themed unit. And in the past, we've actually had the opportunity to meet Holocaust survivors. So hopefully this year that is something that we are able to do as well. If they are not able to come in person, because I know a lot of things are kind of up in the air with COVID and the state of our world, we always Skype with a survivor as well. There's a Holocaust museum out of Philadelphia, and they get survivors on Skype and they talk to classes. So it's always an awesome opportunity for the kids to meet somebody, because there's not very many Holocaust survivors left. And then we have different books that we read. So this on the right is one of the books. It's called Number the Stars, but I have like 5 different choices of middle school, young adult Holocaust themed books. And as the students read the books, we create all of these items that they then put into a cardboard suitcase that they make. And we talk about what would it be like during the time of the Holocaust to be someone who was fleeing the Holocaust and be a refugee. And we have a suitcase museum where all of our suitcases are presented to other classes that can come in and look at them. So this year we might do something where like we make it all digitally or do it where they can show off what they made to the other classes online. But the idea is that they get the chance to really share about what they learned in their books and do some reading. They get to be collaborative because there's kids in small groups all reading different books. And then we also, students pick one topic or subtopic related to the Holocaust, and they do research and present on it to the rest of the class so we can learn more about the history and also practice our speaking skills because speaking and listening are standards for 8th grade English as well. And that's also really preparing them for high school since there's going to be times where they have to do presentations. I know that can be a little bit harder for the middle school students at this age. So we do a lot of prep work to practice and get ready for like our public speaking. And then in quarter 3, this one's a little bit harder for a lot of the 8th graders, but we read some Shakespeare. So we do Romeo and Juliet traditionally. And last year we had, even though we were online for this unit, we had a Shakespeare actor hop on Zoom with us, and they did a really awesome lesson where they taught the students all about the Globe Theater. And he does, this person does Shakespeare in the parking lot. So they may come to our school this year and do Shakespeare in the parking lot where they perform Romeo and Juliet for the students out in the parking lot. But we're going to read it, analyze the text, and really look at who's to blame for the deaths of Romeo and Juliet. So bringing in that argument and persuasive piece. We'll learn about the different persuasive techniques like logos, pathos, and ethos, and talk to students all about how you can do persuasive writing, really connecting that, again, back to their lives. Like, if you want a new cell phone, how can you persuade your parents? I'm sorry in advance, parents, but that's always the example I use. I'm like, what do you want? How can you persuade your parents to get you this thing that you want? So really focusing on that in quarter 3. And then quarter 4 is super fun. We do a poetry unit. So they pick a poet that they want to study and they do a poetry author study and create like a poetry portfolio where they analyze several of their poems. And then they try to look at like, what is this poet's style that they're using? And they try to replicate it by creating their own poems. As well, I have like, I think 8 different books that they can choose from. They're all verse novels, so they're all books that are written in verse for middle schoolers, and they get to choose one, and in small groups, they read them together, so they might be working with anywhere from 1 to 3 other people reading the same book and kind of going through it and analyzing it, looking at figurative language, and really pulling out some of those details as they read. So it's super fun for 8th graders. I'm going to let the next person share about what they do in 8th grade, and then I'll talk about 7th grade a little bit later.
All right, time for the 8th grade's actual favorite class. It is math class, and my goal is always for students to build a lifelong love of learning for math, and I do it using our new Big Math Ideas curriculum projects, problem-based. I have the students teaching the class, so I really like getting the students to lead in the classroom with guidance from me so that they have fun and are able to bring their own personality to the classroom. Every day they get a warm-up. It kind of looks like this, and they have 5 problems every single day to do. If a student is not present, they are still responsible to complete their warm-ups before Friday, because on Fridays we grade them all together, get them into that math mind, get them set and ready for the day. First quarter, we have already started with equations, with solving simple equations, multi-step equations. We're going to be getting into variables on both sides and rewriting equations and formulas. And then we get into transformations. Kids get to make their own little video game kind of thing with translations, reflections, rotations. So it's a lot of fun to have them have a lot more hands-on activities and being able to move things onto a graph and see how it works and understanding how video games started to begin with. So they really like that one with transformations. For quarter 2, we continue with transformations and ending it with translations, dilations, understanding similar figures. perimeters, areas of similar figures, angles, and triangles. So a lot more geometry here. And then we go back to the pre-algebra with graphing and writing linear equations and what makes a line. How do I create a line? How do I, if I look at a line, how do I create a equation from that? And then we have in quarter 3 our systems of linear equations, our substitution, our elimination, and our graphing. So 3 different ways of how to do it. We get into some data analysis and understanding displays and functions and how they connect with our systems as well. And quarter 4, we get into exponents and scientific notations, real numbers, Pythagorean theorem. They get to learn some interesting facts about Pythagoras, who's a very interesting guy, understanding volume and similar solids. So that is what 8th grade math is about. And I will continue and let the next teacher talk about their next class in 8th grade.
All right, that'd be me. I'm Mr. Rowan and I teach 8th grade social studies. My goal is to provide students with a survey of American history. We pick it up right at the end of the American Revolution, and we look at the creation basically of the Constitution, and we go through westward expansion, the Civil War, and then Reconstruction. And so in my class, it's important that students are able to find truth by looking for it through research, inquiry, and debate as they travel back in time using primary sources from multiple perspectives, being true historians, doing research and time traveling back to figure out like what was actually happening, what were people saying, what were the different perspectives that were happening during that time period. And then through this investigation of the past is my hope that students will better understand and navigate the world around them in the present. A lot of disinformation, what's true, what isn't true, how do you do good research, how do you get to that point? And so those are some things we focus on. Quarter 1, we start with a review of early American history. The last time students have had American history was in 5th grade, so it's been 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, boom, and then 8th grade. So I always like to refresh it a little bit. Go back to what the continent was like 10,000 years ago, who initially inhabited the continent, little 13 colonies review and the issues that led up to the American Revolution. One of the things we focus on is the juxtaposition of the Declaration of Independence saying all men are created while the writers of that own slaves. So we kind of look at that as like the founding of our country, and that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the year. So we create an ideal country, and after the students create their ideal country, then I start asking them questions, you know, hey, what would your country be like if you weren't able to raise money? Or what would your country be like if there wasn't a one solid like leader of the country? And that leads us into the Articles of Confederation, which was the first constitution, and it didn't work because they didn't have any way for the country to raise money. So then we go into taxes and talk about taxes and what those taxes are and what they're used for. The Constitutional Convention, the debates that led up to the writing of the Constitution, and then we end the year with a focus on the Bill of Rights, and we look at current events that deal with constitutional issues around the Bill of Rights. So that's our quarter 1. Quarter 2, we start to look at how the United States grew from those original 13 states to the 50 states that we have today. So over the course of this unit, students will fill out and do research and complete a map section by section on how we acquire different sections of what we consider the United States today. So that includes westward expansion. It includes the concept of manifest destiny, that it was the destiny to move west, to bring civilization to the whole continent, to spread over the continent, and to utilize the resources that the continent provided for the new settlers. So what was the result of that? Well, there were numerous indigenous peoples that lived all over the continent. So when the westward expansion happened, then you had European settlers colliding with native cultures, and that collision always had various outcomes. So we'll look at that. We'll look at how, as the country spread west, so did cotton, the creation of the cotton gin, and the effect of that was as the cotton industry grew, then the enslavement of the African people also grew. So we'll compare those two things. And and then also as the country grew west, there was debates and full-on conflict between abolitionists and people of the North who wanted to have a free country, free soilers, where everybody could go and have the opportunities to find work, and then the economy and society of the South that was focused mainly on growing cotton and using the enslavement of African peoples to do that. And so we see as the westward expansion happened, and those conflicts between should there be slavery or should there not be slavery grew and grew. And that takes us into quarter three. And quarter three, we started with a biography bottle project where students do research on some well-known and not so well-known figures of the time. That sets us up nicely, because for the rest of the quarter we'll see those people's names popping up throughout the different lessons and activities that we do. We also, as part of that, each student has to determine what chess piece their person would be based on what they did in their lives. And then we use those bottle figures as chess pieces to play chess, because this quarter includes the Civil War, and chess is like strategies of war, right? And so I kind of combine those two things together. So we look at the causes of the Civil War, declarations of secession by the southern states. We look at the words, what they wrote, why they seceded from the United States, what their motivations for secession were. Some of Lincoln's famous speeches. We look at the complicated history of the Confederate battle flag, battles of the Civil War, and then we start to prepare for the Civil War reenactment, which we've done each year until last year, and we weren't able to do it last year, and we'll have to see this year. I'm hoping that this year we'll be able to do it again. But if all goes well, we work with a nonprofit to get outfitted and trained as Civil War era soldiers. We practice our parts, and there's a battle that's reenacted each year. We meet 300 to 400 other students, and we reenact that battle on what's essentially a large movie set. So we have our parts, we do scenes, there's cameras rolling, there's smoke, there's pyrotechnics, all these type of things. Okay, take one, take two, and then at the end of it all, they edit it down and create a DVD, so it looks like a documentary of that Civil War battle that the students are participating in. And to prepare for that, students do a project-based activity where they plan and put on a fundraising dinner of every Civil War era food buffet, songs, games, whatever the students come up with. It's a little bit different each year, so we start preparing for that at the end of quarter three. And then quarter four, what happens after the war? The country was devastated after 4 to 5 long years of intense battle, and how do we rebuild a country after that when both sides fought so just bitter fighting, to the end? How do you reunite that country? We look at different Reconstruction plans. Of course, Lincoln was assassinated during this time. And then the 13th through 15th Amendment, which abolished slavery, gave citizenship to all people, and allowed equal protection to all people in the country. So a country that was very divided on along racial lines, and what that looked like. How do we incorporate now both African Americans and European Americans into an interracial democracy? And there truly was an interracial democracy for the first few years after the Civil War, where that was the ultimate vision, right? We go back to the very beginning and we look at the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, and we start to see like, okay, during this time period, this is starting to actually come true, right? Like all, well, men, not women, you know, or indigenous Native Americans, but Black and white men were both participants in our democracy. And then soon afterwards, there was violence and backlash against that interracial democracy. And so we'll look at that. Jim Crow laws, the Ku Klux Klan, and other forms of violence and terror that kept the African newly freed slaves from voting. And we'll end up by asking the question and having a discussion, were African Americans free during the Reconstruction period? So that is the 8th grade social studies year. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Shaw.
Hello, I'm Ms. Shaw. I am the science teacher, or some of the 7th graders say the slightly over-dramatic science teacher. I like to really engage the students, and one way I do that is to welcome them to class with a big welcoming, "Good afternoon, my scientists." So we always start off our class with a big smile, and my goal is to really actively engage students in learning about the world around them and how it works through the eyes of a scientist. So we design experiments, we test them, we evaluate. In my class, I like for the students to first discover what we learn before we take notes and apply it. So they have that encounter and they discover it the way maybe the scientists would. I really try to focus in the history and kind of what the mindset was when some of these scientific principles were discovered. So, Ms. Kaplan. So for 8th grade, we start off the year with ecology. So we're currently working through ecosystems, energy flow, and populations. The students are going to soon be learning about the biogeochemical cycles. That's always fun to integrate some chemistry and geology as well in our class, as well as biodiversity and the geologic timescale. Just today, we went on a walk around the campus to look at the ecosystem of Westgate. Soon, we'll have 2 cats roaming around. So the 8th graders are really excited to observe our ecosystem before we have the cats in it, and then talk about the change. We've been talking a lot about how wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone and their impact, and now they're being reintroduced into Colorado. So we've been really having a great time talking about the science that's happening around us right now. So that's our first quarter. And then 2nd and 3rd quarter for 8th grade, we start physics. So we'll start off with motion and forces. You'll see if there's a picture of a film canister rocket. I've done that in the past, and the students absolutely love launching their rockets and designing experiments to see how high they can launch it. So far, the record's about 3 stories. We'll see how far we can get. After that, we'll do Newton's laws of motion and work and energy. We'll learn about roller coasters as well as energy transformations. One lab that I really love to do with the students to incorporate some art is pendulums. And you can have the paint and trace the pathway through, as well as Newton's cradles. So those are so much fun. And then for quarter 4, for physics, we'll finish off the year talking about waves, properties of waves, and really focus in on the different regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. We'll use the word radiation a lot, and it's a word that's commonly, when we say radiation, we kind of cringe a little. However, really in my class, I try to focus on, well, there's radiation all around us, and really taking a look at some words that we use in science that might be used in common language a little differently, and focusing in how it might not always be a bad thing to talk about radiation. It's visible light, infrared, radio, X-rays, gamma rays, there's all different types. And we'll also talk about how cell phones work and digital signals. So students really like learning about how information is transferred throughout our universe. So I think we'll pick it up with 7th grade now.
Yeah, back to me. I had to cheer for Miss Shaw because I used to teach science here, and I love talking about the wolves at Yellowstone. So very exciting stuff. 7th grade language arts, I have the same goal that I have for my 8th graders, right? I want kids to find good books. My classroom is full of books, and that's something I love. And I know this year we have a writing class that the kids take in the afternoons as well. Each of us have a writing class, and we're all doing something a little different. But during that on Wednesdays, we always do Joy of Reading time, where kids just get some dedicated time to read for fun. Because they don't always like the books that we all read as a class, even though I always try to pick ones that I think a lot of kids will enjoy. It's fun for kids to pick their own books. So building that joy of reading is super important once again, and also really like building their creative writing skills as well as their academic writing skills and getting them ready for high school and college. So in quarter one, this quarter, we're doing a lot of short stories. So all of our short stories so far are focused on this idea of what does it feel like to be an outsider. So they're all kind of like thematic based. And then same as with 8th graders, we're kind of pulling all those resources together to really look at this theme of what is it like to be an outsider. 7th graders can really relate to that because a lot of them have experiences or tend to feel that way sometimes, whether it's in school or outside of school or just somewhere in their lives. We all have that experience at one time or another of feeling like an outsider. Along with that, we've been listening to a podcast called Mars Patel. So we do Mars Patel Mondays. So on Mondays, we listen to Mars Patel and answer questions about it and discuss it. It's a really fun like story podcast, essentially about a kid named Mars Patel who realizes that some of his friends are going missing. And it turns out that this eccentric billionaire has been taking all of these gifted kids away to his school. And so there's some mystery behind like, why is he doing this and what's happening? So it really focuses on like finding text evidence. It's those speaking and listening skills that are part of the standards as well. And the kids get super into it. Like you can't see it behind me right now, but on my board, we have all these theories of like what's happening and why. So that's been a lot of fun. We're also doing some articles of the week here and there. It's not every week, but that is part of it as well. And then we're gonna, as October rolls around, I love to bring in Edgar Allan Poe, talk about his life and how dark and fun it was, super fun for him, and then read some of his short stories. So we usually do Telltale Heart, traditionally in 7th grade, and the kids love it, and they love the dramatic readings that I do of it. And then just working on writing paragraphs with evidence, so really focusing on races this quarter. Now you're good. In quarter 2, we read my favorite book of all time. All of the students love this book every time we read it, but it's The Outsiders. So we're going to be reading The Outsiders, doing some close reading and analyzing of it, looking at the theme connections to this first quarter where we're also talking about what is it like to be an outsider. So kind of building in all of these layers. Like last week, we read an article about the psychology behind the need to fit in and why people feel this need to fit in this drive. So also pulling in some of those like nonfiction connections. And then in the book, The Outsiders, it mentions a famous poem. So we also analyze some poetry, tie that into the book. I have a choice project they do at the end, and then we usually end by watching the movie and comparing the book to the movie and the different endings they have for the movie. So the students always love to see it like come to real life, and they always choose like super creative projects, and it's always a lot of fun. So I love this one. For quarter 3, we're going to be reading the graphic novel March Book 1, which is a really awesome graphic novel that we've taught in the past here. And it's written by John Lewis, and it goes into the basically biography of his life. And so it's super cool. Kids who don't normally enjoy reading love graphic novels, so they tend to really connect with it, which is awesome. And then after that, we do some book groups. I have choice novels. So I have, again, same with like the 8th graders, I have anywhere from 4 to 6 different novels that they can choose from. And they'll be put in small groups with usually about 4 other students. And we do book circles, literature circles. So each week they'll be reading, and then they might have a different role each week. So like one week they might be the discussion director who comes up with questions about their chapters. The next week maybe they're the artist and they get to draw something that relates to what they read, or maybe they're the vocabulary finder. Whatever it is, there's different roles, and each week they work together to go through the book and understand it and really like have awesome discussions about it and dive a little bit deeper. And then at the end, we'll do a research and theme paper. So really focusing on those research skills. How can we find credible sources? What they get to pick a topic, so it's more interest-based for them. And then also working on like those writing skills for high school and college, like really, really focusing on those essay skills, giving feedback, and then yeah, just working on those essay skills. That's the big one in quarter 3. And then quarter 4, we really focus on creative writing because the students love that. So usually in quarter 4, we'll do some creative writing, and then students will get to we'll make a book of all of the classes' writings that we do, and they'll get the opportunity at the end to share them out. But we do daily writing prompts, and then each week or every other week, they'll pick one of the writing prompts that we started on, and they'll expand on it and add more. Go back and add more details, more sensory language, work on adding dialogue, building characters and suspense. All the things that we've been reading all year can help them to have examples for how to do that as a writer. And then, yeah, getting peer feedback and teaching writing feedback to students. And also I have some book groups that we do. I have a bunch of different refugee-themed novels that students get to choose one and they get to read them in their group. So there's lots of choices and lots of options. So it always allows for the students to find something that's interest-based. And then I do see your question, and we'll answer questions at the end, but just real quick in case you're hopping off, it'll be posted onto the Westgate website tomorrow. But I'm going to let Kaplan talk now.
I think you mean Mr. Rowan.
Oh, you were next the last time.
Because I was math last time.
Come
All
on.
right.
Okay, Mr. Rowan gets to talk.
Mr. Rowan gets to talk. Mr. Rowan teaches 7th grade math. I won't talk in third person the whole time. My goal is to meet students where they are and provide for them a math class that is challenging, collaborative, and fun. I do this a few different ways. We have the Big Ideas math curriculum, self-created projects and problems. I use as well as a math workshop model. And during all these, students will be able to investigate math to understand the reasoning behind the rules. And by including real life problems, students learn to apply the mathematics that they are learning to the world around them. So that's what I like to do, is create projects that use math that they can relate to. So for quarter 1, this is the quarter we're in, where it's all about adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing rational numbers. So it's a super important skill to have because we start to introduce positive and negative numbers and how to manipulate those numbers and all the rules that go around with them. And there are lots of rules. So we take our time during this unit to make sure that those are clear. It also includes fractions and decimals, so it's a great opportunity to assess students, and if there's gaps in their knowledge with fractions and decimals, then it's a good place to review and pick up on that as well. This unit, I love to end it with, doubling and halving recipes and the cost of those. So that includes doubling and halving fractions, as well as doubling and halving decimals as far as the cost goes. So that's one of the self-created projects I do in this quarter. In quarter 2, expressions, equations, and inequalities. We're just getting down to working some math here. That's what it is. We introduce the variables. What is a variable? How do you solve for a variable? How do you, how do you solve problems with variables? So that's a lot of challenging brain work, because there's, first you have letters instead of numbers, and that's a change. And then when you're manipulating variables across either side of the equal sign or the inequality sign, then that also works the brain, So the brain's doing a lot of things that it's not used to doing in math, and so we spend a lot of time just working through those and learning how to balance equations and inequalities. Quarter 3. Ratios and proportions, percents and probability. With ratios and proportions, you see those a lot of places. And scale drawings I love. Why are you laughing? Did I do something? Okay.
No, Miss Shaw's lights turned off because she wasn't moving enough. I'm sorry. Carry on.
You got to wave your arms in the air when the lights go off, you know? Yeah, sometimes I've sat here after school's over and grading, or I don't even move and the lights go off. It's like, ooh, I better move. Okay. So I love the scale drawings in this section, and that's something that students really get into, creating blueprints and plans using scale drawings. You get to use your hands, and you can see things in a real world way. Percents, we learn how to change fractions into decimals, decimals into percents, and all those type of things. Percent increase and decrease, discounts, markups, and simple interest. And I have an awesome buy your own food truck project that we do here, where students have to come up with a menu and they have to set the prices, and then I start throwing in like, oh, this item's not selling very good, you have to decrease it, or this item's going well. And so I throw some different situations in for that, and students have to think on their feet and decide what they're going to do with their food truck. And then probability, experimental and theoretical probability and compound events, and this gets into gameplay, and there's lots you can do with gameplay, and students love to play games. And so we roll the dice and we flip the coin, and we create some games and learn about probability in that way. And then quarter 4, statistics. We look at samples and populations using random samples to describe and compare populations. And I do a survey project where students come up with a survey question, and they do the survey, and then they create different graphs, and they write up their they think about how it went, and they write up like, oh, this surprised me, or this didn't surprise me. So that's a good project we do for that area. Geometric shapes and angles, circle and circumference, perimeter and area of composite figures. So if you had like a cube, right, and you kind of unfolded it, you can look at all the different sides, and you can think about how you can solve for the surface area and perimeter for that. Finding unknown angles and measures. And for this part of the unit, I have another project where you're the maintenance person at a school, and you have a giant field, and somebody has installed sprinklers, but it doesn't cover all of the field, and so you've got you've got circles of green, but then brown spots in between. And so students figure out like how they need to change the sprinkler systems around. So they look at diameter and circumference, and they figure out what they need to do to cover the whole field with the sprinklers. And then surface area and volume is how we'll end, prisms, cylinders, and pyramids, and cross sections of 3-dimensional figures. So working with some, what's it called? The magnetic putty or whatever it is, where they'll form these figures and then slice them in half, and we'll investigate what that looks like when you slice a 3-dimensional figure in half, and it just gets them working with their hands and doing things like that. So that's what 7th grade math is going to do this year.
All right, and then I have 7th grade social studies. They're going to be building on their knowledge gained last year, focusing on history, geography, civics, and economics as we're moving into the Eastern Hemisphere. And again, this was an example of what a daily warm-up looks like. Every day the students have a warm-up. Usually it's about something that's happening that day, or something that happened in the past, or the national day. So it's a lot of fun for the kids to be like, oh, it's National Lemonade Day. And so then they have to write a story or tell me about something that has happened in their life that goes with the warm-up. And once again, if a student's not present, they're responsible to complete their warm-ups on teams before the end of the weekend. Quarter 1, which we are working on, we start with the 5 themes of geography, and they each got a different country and created a booklet about the 5 themes for that specific country. We are starting to head into timelines, and they're working on annotated timelines as well right now. We'll be getting into what is a primary and a secondary source, making sure they understand the difference between the two, because we use a lot of secondary as well as primary sources in the classroom. and we will start exploring the earliest humans. And then we also have a current event, because I always like to have the students understand what is happening either here in our city, in our state, in our country, or out in the world. And so we have a current event every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks when that happens, a group of 3 to 4 students will be presenting. We had our first presentations today. It was awesome to see them. They were a little nervous, but that's okay. Get used to it. And then they have to present twice throughout the entire year. So once in first and second quarter, and then once in third and fourth quarter about their current event that they chose to do for that week. In quarter 2, we're getting a little bit more about ancient civilization in the Eastern Hemisphere. So we get into ancient Mesopotamia, understanding where our first laws came from, what they did. It's a lot of fun to see the students learning about these first laws and like, oh, this is what I would do. And they're like, whoa, that was what happened? That's not what I expected at all. So to see how it's changed and how we still have some things in today. We have ancient China and how that was more of an isolated civilization, and then it expanded more with the Silk Road, and then getting into ancient Egypt. The students will have an at-home project for Egypt. Usually I give it to them right before they leave for winter break, and then they have the whole break and just like a week or two before we come back, or after we come back from winter break, and that'll be their ancient Egypt at-home project. In quarter 3, we learn about ancient Greece and Rome. Kids love this. It'll be our 5th annual Olympics. So we have an Olympics and they get to dress up and they have some fun and actually have a torch and a lot of awesome fun things, understanding what the Olympics are. We get into economics, understanding supply and demand. The students learn how to, they get $10,000 from me and they learn how to use the stocks and how they can try to make more money, or if they lose all of their money, see what happens in the end. We also have a field trip that we do is Finance Park, and that's at American Family Warehouse, and the kids get to actually get a life, and they get a life and have to figure out, okay, does my kids actually have to have clothes? Yes, your kids do have to have clothes. Yes, they have to have an education. And by the end, I have probably about 90% of my students go and tell their parents the next day. They're like, I don't know how you do this every month. I'm sorry. I love you. I still want that cell phone, though, according to Miss Nieto. So, I mean, they just still want to spend your money. But it's always interesting for them to see, like, okay, we have to have things to live and where money goes. And then in fourth quarter, we do the Middle Ages and Dark Ages, the medieval times. So this is all the same amount of times here in Eastern Europe as well as Europe. I really love this quarter because it's a lot of fun. And then I get to have the Black Death happen and pretty much kill all of the students off. Last year, I think I only had like 2 or 3 who survived in the end. So it's interesting to see if they can survive the Black Death and how it started. Why do we call it the Middle Ages? Why do we call it the Dark Ages when it's all pretty much the same time, even though it wasn't like dark out there? So it's a lot of fun for the kids to understand this whole time period.
Okay, so for 7th grade science, 7th grade science is a lot of fun. So it is a year of life science, and we really focus in on biology and the different principles, starting from cells and going all the way up through ecosystems. So in quarter 1, we start off with our main topic of cellular life. We start with properties of life and how life is organized. Currently, we're working on the cell theory, prokaryotes, and eukaryotes. And then we'll move on to plant and animal cells, cellular transport, and photosynthesis and respiration. We do a lot of great model building this quarter. In the next couple weeks, students will be building models of little bacteria and plant and animal cells. So that is a lot of fun, as well as learning about different types of transportation, whether it's diffusion, osmosis, I can't speak. active transport. There we go. But so it's really seeing about how we're all made up of cells and how we get energy and work through it. So for quarters 2 and 3, this is where we start getting a little bigger and figuring out, okay, how do we as humans have our characteristics? So we focus a lot on molecular biology and genetics. So we start off with cellular reproduction. This is really mitosis, meiosis, asexual reproduction. It is from the cellular side of things. And then we go into the essential dogma of biology. And I absolutely love this unit with the kids talking about DNA, RNA, and proteins. We always see that really awesome ladder, but this year the students really learn what those different pieces are. What's a nucleotide? What's that phosphate group and that sugar? And really start piecing together all of these different scientific principles that we encounter in our life and being able to interpret them in a new way. We do a genetics unit, and students really enjoy identifying if they have dominant genes or recessive. We do Punnett squares. Last year, we created our own creatures and then figured out what different types of creatures we needed. Creatures with wings last year were popular, but it was a recessive gene, so not everyone could get them. As well as going into heredity. So that is our second and third quarter. Our last quarter and for 7th grade is diving into ecology and biodiversity. So it's really focusing, once we have our organisms, we learned how genetic information is passed on. And now how do these organisms interact with each other? How do they build these ecosystems and really collaborate to have a working ecosystem? And what happens to these ecosystems if something disturbs them? So that is our 7th grade science.
All right. So we're at the end of our presentation. We'll be around for a little bit. So if you have some questions, you can either put them into the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you and you can ask the question. But that's all of the information for advocacy as well as 7th grade as well as 8th grade. And I hope you enjoyed. But if you have any questions, please let us know. I will stop my sharing, stop presenting. There we go. Does anybody?
What do I have to do to get $10,000 from you?
I'd like $10,000 myself first. So I have to get that from Mr. Rowan.
No, I'm just teasing. But yes, if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay, well, nobody's asking a question, so I have a few random questions. So, Ms. Shaw, I love cellular biology. I think it's fascinating. But just out of curiosity, how do you make it fascinating for my 7th grader?
Oh, I love that question. So we do start off, for example, our first unit that we started was with cell theory. Right off the bat, that doesn't sound that interesting. But when we dive into the different scientists that discovered it, the different parts, we learn about the different drama associated with science and talking about, well, why do different people study the same thing at the same time and compete, especially when we learn about DNA and Watson and Crick and Rosalind Franklin.
Right. Oh no, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. It took me back to college biology, and I'm like, there's no way. How do you make this interesting for the kids? Like, yeah.
And I didn't say, but we do a lot of experiments. I meant to mention we extract strawberry DNA. And last year when I did that with the kids, they all came home and they were like, what other fruits can we try this on? And so they were getting the peroxide and showing their parents and families how to extract DNA, and it looks like a little booger.
That's awesome. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. All right, and then I just have another sort of, I don't know, I don't want to open a can of worms, but Mr. Rowan, how do you approach So obviously we all know that slavery is abhorrent. What happened to the Native Americans is abhorrent. But we can't, and we can look at history through the lens of the morality and the mores and mores we have now. But how do you approach it to like a 7th grader to say that to them,
For them, it's 8th
it was
grade.
all, well, yeah, for them it's 8th grade. Like back then, it's all good, I've got 4 slaves. I'm a rich guy, but now we look at that and that's, it's obviously abhorrent. Just curious how you approach that.
Mr. Rowan, you're muted.
By doing just what you said, right? I mean, I think it's really fun to go back and go back in time and look and see what people actually thought during the time, right? And it's eye-opening, it's eye-opening. So I like to do that, but then I like to also come back to like current events that are happening that you can draw a line directly from the effects of slavery, how many hundred years ago to the present, and try to bring it to current time. So there is some relation to it. So I do it that way, and just focus on the truth. This is what happened, and then we just come to terms with it, and we see. The beautiful thing is, we see how far we've come, but then there's also opportunities to say, what else do we still need to do, to bring around the ultimate ideals of the founders, right? Which was that all people are created equal, and so that's what we did. I mean, we start the unit and we look at the origins of race itself and where that came from, that like there was a time when races evolved, what there weren't any races, then there was race, then there was the white race and the black race, and there was pseudoscience that started to assign all these personality characteristics to different races and created a hierarchy. At the same time, Darwin was like doing the origin of species, humans got they put humans into that thing, and so they tried to categorize them and put them at different levels. And so to understand that, like, oh yeah, people actually created a hierarchy of races and assigned different characteristics to those, which essentially they were using to justify the enslavement of human beings.
Right. Part of which through phrenology, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. School size. So that's what we do.
That's great.
Cool. Thanks.
Looking forward to 8th grade from our daughter.
Awesome. Well, I love your daughter, so I'm looking forward to having her in 8th grade.
You say that now.
Yeah, wait till the school progresses.
Yep. Cool.
I have a question I'm trying to help my 8th grader keep organized, I guess. And so I've gotten into Teams so I can kind of see what he's doing. And Ms. Shaw, I sent you an email about this a little bit ago, but I'm kind of addressing it a little bit now. Are the assignments that are in there accurate as far as what's due, or since you've got some kids at home during quarantines and stuff like that, is Teams not so accurate? Just trying to understand.
I can speak for my class really quickly. So I know, and the other teachers might be somewhat similar, but I do post assignments on there mostly for the kids who are at home. If they're in class, we're usually doing it on paper. But there are a few where I've said specifically on the assignment, like this one, everyone is doing this one like together here on Teams. But for the most part, for me at least, the online ones are for the kids who are at home currently, if that makes sense. But if you ever have a specific question, yeah, feel free to reach out to us about which assignments, because I know I've posted all of their readings on there, but a lot of those we've done in class together on paper.
For social studies, all of the assignments on Teams are exactly what everybody's doing.
Okay. So if something says overdue in Teams, I guess what I'm trying to understand, is there a chance you guys have done that in class and it's just not showing up in Teams? Or if it says overdue in Teams, do I need to be saying, hey, we need to get on this?
It could be either of those, but it also could be like we did something in class and they just never turned it in online, so it looks like that they didn't do it. So
Okay.
always just double check with that one. I know with my assignments, I'm doing more of it like here in the classroom and some assignments online, because then they can do, like for my current events for my 7th graders, you can do it either on paper, because some people like to write it more, or you can do it online. So I have that available for both of for all students if they want to do either in paper or online. If they are at home, then yes, it would have to be online. So it's available for them.
Okay. Is that kind of helps. Ms. Shaw, I guess want to ask in general, is that accurate with your class as well?
Yes, so in science class, it is the similar. Also, each Monday for our warm-up in science class, we do a quick check. So where the students will check back through teams and see my feedback and grades. So that's a time also where students can see, oh, we did this on paper in class. I need to make sure I turn this in.
Okay.
So each Monday we do kind of a bookworking day or bookkeeping few minutes in the beginning to really make sure we're all set up for the next week.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, I'm probably gonna steal that idea from Shaw because that sounds like a great idea. Because there is some confusion with some students having to be online at times and other students being in person. So just doing a check on like, okay, hey, we did this one on paper. You can turn it in if you turned in the paper. Is a great idea. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we thought, after a whole year of mostly being online, we might add more, like, let's do some paperwork, some hands-on work, maybe not as much time on the computer this year. So we are trying to incorporate some things that aren't on the computer.
Okay, I think that's great. So thank you.
Sure thing.
Thanks for your awesome questions.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? We're happy to answer. Awesome. If you come up with more questions later, you can email your advocate first and ask them. They might have the answer, or then reach out to Ms. Kaplan. If we're not sure, we can help you get to her. I always say that. I say, if you have a question, ask Ms. Kaplan. Don't ask me, ask Ms. Kaplan. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, you can reach out to any of us. We'll be happy to answer. And I hope you guys have a great night.
Yep, and this recording will be up tomorrow, and so we'll tell you guys where to find it with the advocacy update this weekend and everything like that. So if you do have that question, just hold on to it. If you don't hear about it by Monday, let us know and we'll get back to you then. All right. Have a good rest of your night as well as your nice long weekend.
Thank you
See
all.
y'all later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.